Hey YouTube, Hickory Stick back with you. So, as you saw at the beginning of the video, I decided to go out and test some rounds that I had loaded up for my 38 Super today. And you also might have noticed that I had 2 failure to chambers in that video. Well, what I did was, like an idiot, I turned the camera off after I fired that first mag. I went back, I picked up the 2 failed chamber rounds, put them back in the magazine of the gun. They both chambered and fired fine. So I went through that. I spent through that other round magazine of ammo, picked up all my brass, and in the dark I lost 2 pieces of brass, so we're down to 16 pieces of brass. But checked all my brass. I don't see any pressure signs. All the brass looks good. I had no damage to them or anything like that. No ejector swipes, anything of that nature. Everything looks good with the brass. So I think what it was with those 2 failures to chamber is I got this brass at a gun show, and it's all random, scattered, different brands. There's about 3 or 4 different brands of brass in here, fired out of no telling what guns. And a lot of it, I think, appears to be fired out of a gun with a really tight chamber, because I'm using a standard size die. I'm not using a small base sizing die. I'm using a standard size. And when I've chambered all of this brass, a bunch of the pieces of it didn't even touch the die when I sized it. Or if they did touch it, just barely. So it had to be a tight chambered gun. And what happened, I believe, is I'm using Spear 115 355 full metal jackets, round nose. And it's a little short bullet, being as it's only 115 grain. Well, when I loaded them in some of these tight chambered rounds, or tight pieces of brass, when I loaded them, my bullet just got slightly crooked in them. So I think that's what caused the failure to chamber. 100% certain it was my fault, something with the brass, because I have never had a problem with this gun. It's a Colt. It has ate every kind of ammo I've ever wanted to put through it. So this was the first time I have ever had a malfunction while shooting this gun. So I'm 100% certain it was my fault. I'm fairly certain that it was the little crooked bullets was what the issue was. So in this video, the reason why I went out and just fired 18 rounds was, for this video, I wanted to run through decapping, repriming, recharging, seating bullets, resizing, whole 9 yards, going through, reloading all this brass. Now, I've only fired this brass 1 time since I cleaned it last, so I'm not going to bother to clean it again. It's still pretty clean. I mean, it's just got a little black in it. I'm just going to wipe it off on the outside so that I don't get any crud inside my sizing die, but I'm not going to run it through the cleaner. So, like I said before, we're going to be loading 115 grain Spear TMJ round noses, 355 diameter. I've got a few left. I've loaded already about 50. I think I loaded 60 rounds of it in here, and test fired some of them. Test fired these. I've got some already prepped and cleaned brass and already primed, but we're not going to use that. I want to take you through the process of doing everything and loading from scratch. So the powder we're going to be using is Accurate number 7. And it says right on the Accurate bottle that it's great for 38 Super, 357 SIG, 40 Smith & Wesson, semi-auto handguns. It says for high-performance semi-auto handgun. Well, the reason why I chose it was not because of what the bottle says. The reason why I chose the Accurate number 7 is that I went through this manual. Now, if you don't have one of these manuals, this manual is great. It is the Load Books USA manual for 38 Super. They've got them for all kind of different guns. And what they did was basically they went in and they compiled all the data, load data, from a bunch of different bullet manufacturers, different powder manufacturers, for one caliber. This one's for 38 Super. I've got one for my 4570. Every caliber that I buy, that I try to reload, that they make a book for, I'm going to get one of these. Just keeps you from having to buy all these different load manuals. Like, I've got a load manual from Nosler that came with my rock chucker kit, but every bullet manufacturer has its own manual. But you don't. They're expensive. They're like $40 for a manual. You don't want to go out and buy all those different manuals if you don't have to. I think this book was $7. Covers everything. So when I wanted to choose a powder, I knew that I was going to be loading more than just these 115 grain full metal jackets. I got several different bullets that I want to try in this 38 Super. So I looked through the book and I searched for powder that would work with numerous of the bullets that I want to try, the different grain weights, the different types of bullets, and that was accurate number 7. Now, when the budget allows, I'm going to try some different powders, but for now, being budget conscious, I just grabbed that one. So we're going to take you through the whole process, load everything up, get everything going, and then we'll take it out to the range and we'll do some more shooting through the gun. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to decap our brass. Now, if you watch the first video, I explained in there that you've got an option when you are decapping. You can decap while you size, and in your die kit, your sizing die will have a decapping pin in it, which will allow you to size and decap at the same time. But I don't like to size and decap at the same time. I like to decap first so that if I'm going to clean my brass, I can clean it without the caps in it. That way, your primer pockets can get cleaned along with the rest of the brass. But if you got a primer in there, you can't get that primer pocket clean. So I like to use this universal decapping die. Now, several companies have got them. This happens to be a Lee because I like Lee dies. They're cheap. I think this thing was $15. And all it does is it goes in and it punches the cap out. Now, the decapping pin on it is held by a collet. And it's done that way so that if you get crooked with your brass or something like that and you don't hit the primer pocket hole, the flash hole, if you don't hit it straight, you won't break your pin. You will just shove it up and you can reset it. So to use this die is pretty simple. Push your ram all the way up, and I already have a 38 Super shell holder in the press. So you push your ram all the way up. You run your die down just until it touches your shell holder. You don't want to put pressure on your shell holder. You just want to run it in there just a little bit. Once it's touching your shell holder, you tighten down your ring, your set ring, and you're good to go. From that point, all you do, put your brass in, run your brass up, pop it out. Now, this little brass catch on this RCBS rock chucker, it does okay. It catches probably 90% of your primers. It drops one out every now and then, and it does have a tendency to walk itself backwards like this, and it'll get all out of wax and get far away and get like that. So you kind of have to push it back forward some, but it does well. Now, I'm kind of gentle with mine. I don't press real hard. I don't move real fast when I decap, because of the fact that if something is crooked or something's not set in there right, I can feel it before I put any pressure down on it. These primer pockets on these are good and tight. Some of the primer pockets in the other ones, in some of these rounds that I got from that gun show, weren't real tight, but these are pretty tight. These are nice and these feel pretty good. Just one at a time. All you got to do, deprime. I think I got 4 left. I had already deprimed some of them, just testing it out. Finish these 4 up real quick. There we go. And that is all there is to depriming. Alright, so I had to readjust my camera so you could get a little bit better line of sight. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to size our brass. Now, like I said before, I didn't bother to run these through the cleaner. I'm just going to kind of wipe them off with my shirt sleeve as we go, just to get any major crud off of them. So we're going to pull out our sizing die. Now, one thing I have not done to this die yet is remove the pin, the sizing pin. I just hadn't done it. You can, if you're not going to decap as you size, there's no reason to have that pin in there. But I just hadn't removed it yet. I just hadn't thought to do it. So on your sizing die, you're going to set your sizing die the same way as you would your decapping die. Now, you got instructions. Lee sends good instructions with theirs, and I'll just read you the instructions just to show you. It says, screw the full-length sizer in until it touches the shell holder. Then lower ram and screw the die 1/4 to 1/3 turn more. Raise the ram and tighten the lock ring finger tight. So, and that's pretty much, I found that to be pretty much true for any dies that I've messed with, any sizing dies I've messed with. So we're going to pick our ram up. This lock ring should be in about the right spot because I have been using it before. Let me back it off a little bit. Yep, there it was. It was about the right spot. So there it's touching. I'm going to go in another 1/4 turn. There we go. Raise it. And that's a little too much to my notion. That feels good there. So I'm going to put it there. Sometimes it's a 1/4 is a little bit too much. I don't like to press really hard on the die because you can tear your die up, crack your die if you press too hard. So there we go. So that's good. But you want good contact from your shell holder to the base of your die so that you make sure you get all of your brass piece in there. Alright, so this is a carbide sizing die. And being a carbide sizing die, I do not have to use any kind of case lube on this brass. The carbide is slick enough that you don't need it. If we were loading 4570 or some other type of rifle, then yes, and we did not have a carbide die, then yes, we would have to use some case lube. But we don't have to lube these cases with this die. So put your case in your shell holder, come up. I usually just take a quick look, my first one, just to make sure that I got it right. And then it's going to take a little force. Push it in. But it shouldn't take too much, which that did not. And you got a nice sized case. Put it on the other side of my case holder. Go to the next one. And when you're sizing cases, all you want to do is you just want to pay attention as you're sizing them to make sure that you don't get any weird, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, any weird feelings. Like something is bending or something's not lining up right. You want your case to go in nice and smooth. And my chamber of my gun is obviously larger than any of the chambers of any of the guns that had fired this brass previously. So therefore, I get nice, good contact on my sizing die when I size my brass out of this gun. No worries about the brass being too small this time. It goes right on in, slides right in. Got good contact with the die the entire stroke of the ram. It's not a slow process. So the main thing you want to make sure is that every time that your die goes completely, your ram goes completely up, and that your piece of brass goes completely in your die. I'm going to bring you down and see if I can get a good visual on this. If my phone will focus. There we go. Make sure that you got good contact with your die. And it goes a little bit further. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Now, some brass will be harder to size than others. Big pieces of rifle brass, they will be hard. They will take more force. This is small pistol brass. Not going to take a lot of force. And this rock chucker press is really good. This thing's got good leverage the way it's built. It has very good leverage. It doesn't take much force on your handle to size your brass. I really like it. It was a good choice. My wife got me this for my birthday last year. And as a matter of fact, if she hadn't have got me this, I probably would still not be started reloading, because I would have procrastinated and not bought it. Okay, so that's all of them resized. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the die out. We're good to go on that. So the next step in this whole process is recapping. So I said we were going to prime next, but I got to thinking about it, and I decided that before we prime, we're going to flare our case mouths. But before we flare our case mouths, I want to go ahead and do a quick check of our cartridge length. Now, your cartridge overall length on the 38 Super is .900, and your trim length is .895. So, I'm sorry, not cartridge overall length, your maximum case length. So, max case length is .900, trim length .895. So, I just want to check these, and I had trimmed all this brass when I got it to trim length, and this one's .892, so it's a little bit under. And I actually checked all of these before I started the video, so we're at 890 here, and all of them are between 890 and that one's 889, so they're all between 889 and about 894. So we're good on our case length on the cartridges. That's something that you have to do. You need to do it every time that you reload, because every time you fire around and resize it, the brass has a tendency to stretch. Will you have to trim every time? No, not likely at all. But eventually you will have to trim. But it's a good practice to check your case length every time. So, now that we've checked our length, what we're going to want to do is we're going to flare the case mouth. Now, flaring the case mouth, what that does for us is that makes our bullet easier to insert into our piece of brass. So when we sized this brass, the sizing die made the entire cylinder the same diameter. Well, that's the diameter of the sizing die. Well, the bullet is about that diameter too. So what you need to do is you need to flare your case mouth a little bit so that your bullet can go in easier. Now, the last time that I prepped all these cases and I trimmed them, I also chamfered the outside edge and chamfered the inside edge, so it gave us a nice little transitional lip that will go in there. So once we flare it this time, it'll be easier to put a bullet in. So our die kit from Lee has a powder through expanding die in it. Now, what they intended this die to be used for was to, number one, expand the case mouth. But also they intended it so that when you expanded your case mouth, while your ram was still at full extension, you could dump your powder into your shell or your cartridge. I don't do that way. I prime separate. I charge my cases separately, so I don't use the powder through feature. But I do use the case mouth expansion. So, reading the instruction says to screw this down until it touches your shell holder and then back it out one full turn. And it's just barely touching because I had it set already from last time. So, touching the shell holder, we're going to back it out one full turn. There's our piece right there. There we go. One full turn. And we're going to tighten down. There we go. Tighten down our lock ring. Now, to adjust the flare, what you do is you turn this in to make it go further down to adjust the flare. But your starting point is one full turn out, and that's probably not going to flare at all Yeah, see, that was nothing hardly. So you can't even see an indentation. So we're going to go in, I'm going to go in about a quarter turn with it. There we go. We'll see what that does. That gave us a little bit. I'm going to go in a little, about another quarter. So that's going to be a half turn in from starting point. Yeah, and I can see a little bit of a flare. And I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if my phone will go focus. You can see just a little flare there. And that's all I want. So that's what we're going to go with. And this die kind of feels weird when you go into it, because what it does is it pushes the expander, actually rides up and down inside the die. And when you go up into it, you can feel it touch that expander, and then you'll feel that expander move up. And then when you come back down, it's still on that expander till it pops loose. Now, Lee's instruction manual says that the reason why it does that is so that if you charge the case, that little vibration action of it going up and down will make the powder fall all the way through. But it just, the first time I used this die, I thought something was wrong with it. Thought I had done broke something loose inside of it. Then I read the instruction manual, which I should have done in the first place, but you know how us guys are. Try it first, read instructions later. So we're just going to run through here and flare all these case mouths real quick. Got 22 ammo falling off the shelf on my. Now, you could do this operation before or after you prime. For safety, yeah, you want to do it before you prime in case something weird, funky happens. I mean, it ain't likely you're going to set that primer off, but just in case something weird, funky happens, you could possibly set the primer off. So you really want to do this before you prime, which is why I decided to go ahead and do it now. I'd rather show you the safe way to do it the first time than to have something happen and be sitting here with egg on my face like an idiot. Okay, so that's got all of them flared. So now the next step, genuinely, is priming. So we're going to be using Winchester small pistol primers. And I bought a new batch of these the other day, and I've only used a few of them. So we're going to be using our RCBS primer, hand primer. Now, this hand primer comes with two different inserts. One for large primers and one for small primers. The black one's for large, the white one's for small. And also, this one takes, as I mentioned earlier, this in the first video, this one takes shell holders. Now, RCBS has one that is universal, but the kit, this one came with the kit, and since this one is exactly like the one that is universal, with the exception it uses shell holders instead of being universal like the other one, there's no reason for me to go out and buy a universal primer when I can just buy extra shell holders for like $2. So that's what I did. So I'm going to dump some primers in here. I'll start off with 10 of them. That's upside down. Now there's little ridges in it. If you've never seen one of these things, there are little ridges inside these things that will flip primers right side up for you. So you don't have to worry about how your primers land when you put them in. This thing will flip them over for you. And I should have dumped 2 rows out at once, and I wasn't thinking, but I'm going to go ahead and dump these like that. Oh, I didn't lose any. I got lucky. Go ahead and get these put up right. Put my cap, put my lid on. Want it away. There we go. Okay. This thing has a handy little doorway on it that can shut them off. So, get it put in. Get ready to prime. Alright. Feed your little primers in there. Now, when you go into priming, you want to feel the primer pocket as you go. Because if your primer pocket gets too loose, that means that your brass is worn out. So, I feel it as I go. That felt good and tight. And I discovered something if you're using one of these RCVS primers, hand primers. If you let this thing come back gently, then sometimes the little primers get stuck and they don't pop the next primer in there. So I let it go like that, and the next primer always loads in. Now, just to show you something while we're doing this, when you seat your primer, you want your primer to be just below flush. As you can see, it's just below flush on it. And that's what you want. You don't want it sticking up, and you don't want it too deep. So just below flush is what you're looking for. You want to feel each primer as you let it go. Check it. Make sure you got it in the right spot. Feel it going in. That one felt good. I noticed that some of the primer pockets on some of this brass were a little bit loose. They weren't too loose to where I'm concerned about them yet, but I figure they were loose enough that I feel like I probably won't get but a couple, 3 firings out of it before I'm going to have to discard those cases. But I think I paid 9 cents a piece for them, so if I can get 3 firings out of them, that won't be too bad. And some of this brass I noticed, I think it's Aguila brass, or if that's how you pronounce it. It says AUSA on it. Some of them I noticed that the primer pockets are actually deeper than other ones. That feels a little bit tight there, for some odd reason. That doesn't feel right. Yep, something has went awry here on that. So that primer did not seat right. So got a problem here with this primer. Did not want to seat right. And now we're hung up. So we're going to have to dismantle this thing and see what the issue is. Oh, I see what's wrong. I got a primer that is in there that has set in there crooked. So slide it. This thing comes apart pretty easy. So I got 2 issues going on here. I got one primer here that tried to go in sideways on this piece of brass. And then I got another primer in here that is trying to be inside here sideways. Actually, it looks like I've got 2 of them in here. If this comes apart. No, it's just the one. Okay. So that one's alright. Okay. So the next adventure is to get this piece of brass out of here. Put that right there from there. So we got this primer in there and it is stuck. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to decap this baby. So I'm going to work on this, so I'm going to leave you for a minute while I get this fixed. Okay, so I figured out what the problem is. Apparently, I had some crud in this primer pocket. So I got that fixed. I'm looking at this primer that was stuck in our capper, our hand priming tool, and it looks good. So I'm going to put it back in with the others, and we're going to continue on with our priming. I cleaned out this primer pocket on this piece of brass, and it looks good now. So we're going to stick this thing back together, and we're going to go on about our business here. I did have to run it through the decapper and decap it, and I didn't put that on video, but just a word of warning: when you do something like that, when you do have to use your decapping tool to cap a live primer, you want to be very cognizant of the fact that it is live, and you want to be sure and be extra careful and extra gentle when you are depriming it, lest you cause the primer to explode while you're doing it and it blow up. And I mean, it's a primer, it's probably not going to take your hand off, but it will hurt you. So just a word of warning while you're doing something like that. Just back together. Alright, and we're back in business. Our primer's back. I don't know why that. I understand the reasoning behind why the one didn't want to go in there, but I don't know why it tried to get crooked on the other primer. Okay, yeah. Went in there nice and smooth that time. So it's good to go. So we'll finish up priming these, and when we finish priming these cases, provided everything goes well with them, the next thing we will be doing is weighing some charges. Like I said before, this RCBS Charge Master that I've got, this is ball powder we're going to be shooting, and it does very well metering ball powder. I mean, it throws it dead on. I have not, within a half a tenth is what I've seen out of it. So it does a good job. So I really like it. So that's that. Everything's primed. They are all pretty and ready to go. Get that primer out of there. Set back up on the shelf. So there we go. 16 cases, primed, ready for powder.